look at a couple of different things, one of which is the importance of pollinators and how to promote them, and then how to manage a climate resilient garden. And look at some particularly good upstate New York pollinator plants. So, so why do we care about pollinators? I know I care about them because I spend a lot of time amongst the bees, and that's important to me. But for all of us, 1 in 3 mouth foods of our food and drink require the presence of a pollinator. A lot of crops are entirely dependent upon pollinators and really don't. They've evolved to work with certain species. So without those species, I'll talk about those in a moment, we will not have those fruits and vegetables. Um, and we usually think about pollinators being our honeybee friend here, Apis mellifera, but pollinators take a lot of different forms across the insect kingdom into birds and even some mammals in certain parts of the world. So if you look at this interesting chart, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but these are the things that are from little dependency upon pollinators to great dependency. And a lot of the higher value crops, fruits and nuts particularly, are really dependent upon pollinators. And then in terms of fruits and vegetables, you get to squashes and other things, and they become very, very important. So just some crops that really are highly dependent upon pollinators. Blueberries in this part of the world are really need pollinators, and honeybees being the most efficient pollinator in the insect kingdom, both by their physical ability to get deeply into a flower and also their very tight focus on working through a given blossom and hitting every plant, every blossom, every part of a flower, make them very valuable for farmers. Other pollinators, pollinate more opportunistically, let's say, and will hit some of the parts of the flower, but not all. And that's why, we really focus a lot of effort on honeybees because they are that important. And, this is true to the point where one of the major expenses that blueberry farmers have and other farmers is paying for hives to be trucked in and migratory bees to come and work crops. Almonds are also a plant tree that really needs uh, pollinators, particularly again honeybees. They're almost exclusively dependent upon honeybees for pollination. It has become such a growth industry that a major source of beekeeping income comes from almond pollination. And the almonds in California come into blossom in February each year. And literally, tractor trailers from across the United States, from Florida to Maine and everywhere in between, head to California with millions upon millions of bees to do that pollination, which makes it an economical crop. But it's also something that becomes very stressing to the bees because they're traveling for long distances in confined spaces. They are let loose on a monocrop. So their entire diet consists of one floral source. And also they're exposed to, higher levels of agricultural chemicals and products being on that than they would in the wild. So, and then they're also mixing with bees from across the United States. So any disease that becomes present in one part of the country almost instantly gets spread across the country after February because all these bees meet together. They come together. They fly into each other's hives on occasion. They physically contact one another, and they become vectors of their own diseases. So it's become both a important growth industry and also a problem in terms of bee health. This is just an interesting chart that shows that the growth of California almonds is relatively new. And it was in the early 2000s. You can see the spike that happened. I think it's 2003, 2004. They started planting large amounts of almond trees in California. And that really drove the industry. Prior to that, California had a small or much smaller minor crop in almonds. Some of the things that we worry about in the garden, though, are pumpkins and squashes. Really need pollination services of our own, either our own honeybees or pollinators in our own garden. Um, and something else are apples. Apples will self-pollinate to a degree. But if you've ever seen a lopsided apple, one that's not fully developed all the way around, that is was an incompletely pollinated, cross-pollinated flower, because the bee has to hit all the stamens and pestils of a given blossom for that fruit to fully develop. So when it doesn't hit each of them, or something else pollinates it, not a bee, and doesn't do it as systematically as honeybees do, it will grow in a lopsided fashion. So they not only are they necessary for the development, but also for the quality of apples as fruit. So who are the pollinators? Bees are what we think of, and they certainly are very efficient pollinators. Honeybees, an introduced species, is the dominant one, but there are over 400 native bee species in New York alone. And they run the gamut. Most of them are solitary bees, very few of them sting. Most of them do not collect the amount of honey and pollen as honeybees do, but they do pollinate. They do get on flowers and pollinate. Um, so they are important. They just don't have the numbers or the systematic social behavior of a honeybee. Flies are the second most important pollinator. And carrots and some other commercial crops depend upon them for efficient pollination. There's no keeping of wild flies. They are just something one has to depend upon to be in the neighborhood. So one needs to have a pollinator-friendly landscape. And also flies don't often look like the house flies that drive us crazy. They often look like this tabanid fly, or sometimes they look quite like bees. So because there's so many different varieties of flies, it's really hard to tell which ones are which. Uh, Vertebrates are minor pollinators. Our old friend, the ruby-throated hummingbird, which is now coming back to the Northeast. I heard of someone down in the Hudson Valley has started to feed them, so they'll be up here momentarily. They are pollinators that's incidental to them because they're drinking the nectar. But you can see here, I think this is on bee balm or another flower. This hummingbird is reaching deep into the flower, so it doesn't really have the same effect as a honeybee that physically goes into the flower, has a long tongue, and also has a hairy body that collects pollen and moves it around. Butterflies and moths, we think about the monarch. A monarch is associated with milkweed. We're going to talk about that. But then they're mostly on wildflowers rather than or vegetables or domesticated flowers. Um, but they're like the hummingbirds. Pollination is secondary to them gathering nectar. They kind of incidentally do it as they're moving along, so it's a relatively low rate of efficiency. So why the sudden focus on pollinators? I mean, this is a world now where New York State has a pollinator protection plan, as do most other states. It's an interesting document you can find online if you just Google New York State Ag and Markets Pollinator Protection Plan, or NYS Pollinator Protection Plan. It will come right up. Because our world is changing and the pollinators are decreasing rapidly in number. And the primary reason is that habitat's changing. Our physical world is changing quite a bit. Um, every time that a subdivision is built or a shopping mall is built, it reduces the foraging opportunities, nesting, and you can see it at very different levels. Interestingly, not as much here in upstate New York. We see a little bit of it, but compared to other places like Florida, if you've ever been to Florida, or metro areas like New York or Boston, it's quite dramatic. Um, and then the other threat is we have a really growing homogenization of our landscape. And this is true in agriculture, where we're growing monocrops. So when you go out to the Midwest, for example, you'll see miles upon miles of corn or soybeans, and they're planted fence row to fence row. So there's very little room for any other kind of plant. This limits it. You also see it in suburban areas where you have homogenized lawns. So there's acres upon acres or subdivision upon subdivision, all with green grass and a limited range of plants that are blooming at more or less specific times. Climate change. Our climate is definitely changing. We see that in our own weather patterns here in upstate New York. We have very dramatic shifts where last winter, the lake that I live near, Otsego Lake, didn't freeze, and this year it froze kind of in record time. So we go from one dramatic change to one extreme to the other. And that impacts plant growth because with the growing season changing, it's hard for plants to establish themselves, and the floral options are limited. Um, and then there are also in our region, I think most particularly in the Adirondacks and the mountaintops, but some very specialized environments that have evolved with a very small range of plants that are growing and a very small array of pollinators. And as those get squeezed out, they're not replaced at this time because nothing has moved into the food chain to replace them. So we lose that whole component of the ecosystem. And finally, pesticides and other chemicals. Um, I see this with honeybees all the time. As honeybees are exposed both to acutely uh, poisonous pesticides, such as if you have an apiary that is near a farmer's field and they spray a crop for one reason or another, and the bees go into into the crop, into the farmland and bring back that pesticide into the hive, it will wipe out the hives. You also see that actually the bigger problem has been there's chronic toxicity that happens with what's called neonicotinoid pesticides. There is a low grade of toxicity now being bred into plants so that both food plants and ornamentals, so that they're resistant to pests. But what that means is when honeybees gather pollen from those plants, they're picking it up. It doesn't contain enough toxicity to kill them right away, but it does disorient them and also causes them, when they bring back that pollen with a low grade of toxicity, it goes into the hive, and then that very slowly starts to poison the rest of the hive. And also you have an issue with it may not kill them outright, but it disorients them. And bees have a very highly attuned navigation system that requires, a lot of nervous activity in the nervous system. And the toxicity impedes that. And so they will fly off from their hive and virtually never return. So this is one of the issues. There's been a pretty growing degree of awareness of the neonicotinoids and systematic pesticides. So we're starting to limit that, but it's been in the environment for quite a while now, and it's been one of the sources of what you might hear of colony collapse disorder, which was something that was in the 2006 to 2010 date range. Over this past winter, we had a very high number of hive mortality across the United States, universally. I had only a 25% survival rate of my bees. Last year, for the first time in many years, I had a 100% survival rate. So I have this, again, the seesawing effect. So how can we help pollinators survive? What can we do to build a more resilient environment for them and ultimately for us? The first thing is to recognize existing habitat. And one of the good news is for us here in upstate New York, we have great pollinator, by and large, we have great pollinator habitat. The landscape's varied. It's a mix between field and forest because there's a lot of land that has gone fallow, like this field over here, which had been a part of a dairy farm 20 or 30 years ago. It's now home to a lot of different types of plants. This is obviously late summer, not quite September maybe, because I can see the goldenrod is almost out. But this provides a very strong base for pollinators to live on. So as you think about your property, and I know many people in upstate, if they live out a little bit of the country, have some acreage. But even if you don't have a lot of acreage, if you have a city lot, think of mixing it up. Think of if you like a formal space, create a formal space and then leave some wild, a strip of wild, so that there's room for different types of creatures to grow and live. Um, So you also need to be aware of what's happening in your environment. Obviously, if you live next to a farm that does a lot of spraying, you want to be aware of that. That's not a terribly common thing, but are there neighbors, if you live in a suburban area, where they do a lot of lawn treatments? And the lawn treatments can be somewhat toxic. Do you use chemical interventions for landscaping problems? If you look at the label, make sure that you follow that so that you can minimize any disruption, and always advocate for environmentally sensitive practices with our friends, neighbors, and family. We can do some to provide some new habitat. Some people think that they like to keep bees, which is a wonderful thing to do. I've been doing it for a long time. It's very rewarding, but you shouldn't keep bees just for keeping bees to save, quote unquote, save the bees. It's not a good strategy for you or for the bees because it requires a lot of input. And if you don't do the input, both financially and labor and um, learning, you'll end up making things worse because unattended hives or poorly managed hives can become kind of breeders for problems. So you need to make the commitments either all in, or if you really want to support beekeeping, buy honey from a local beekeeper. Go to your farmer's market, buy honey from them, help support their working with the bees. That's a great way to move forward. Um, but there are other things that you can do. You can provide some landscaping. So again, that mixed terrain is very helpful. Leave some wild. You can't leave land to go fallow indefinitely because that nice meadow in the previous slide will grow up into brush and will become unusable. And it'll get multiflora rows and blah, 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 and you'll end up with a mess. But, brush hog it once a year, not, don't mow it down every three or four times a year. Uh, Leave some, blossoming plants up, or choose to mow after the blossom has been through, so that you might mow after the goldenrod if you do it in September or earlier in the spring, but be strategic about that. So we're going to talk a little bit about building pollinator gardens themselves, but you can manage the habitat. So what you want to do is think in a variety of different dimensions. The first dimension is time. So right now we're about to go, as you can tell, we're probably all gardeners, you can feel it in your bones. We're about to come into the blossom. So we're about to have everything kind of pop open. And you want to have, and correspondingly, the pollinators are starting to come out of hibernation or hatching out of eggs that have been laid in the ground or wherever they're coming from. Bee hives are kind of waking up. So try to have your blossom start as early as possible. Plant early plants, even if it's crocuses or snowdrops. Um, one of the best pollination plants for honeybees are things that people with good lawns hate, which is dandelions. I know as a beekeeper that when the dandelions come out in May, I don't have to worry about feeding them. I don't have to worry about getting the bees through. They're officially through the winter. They can feed themselves once the dandelions come in, and then all the subsequent blossoms thereafter. So start early in your planning and think about things early season, things that will go through the summer and then go as far into the fall as possible. We'll talk about some of the plants that are really good for extending your season. Also think about a garden that is multidimensional in terms of space, so that it grows up and across, because each species accesses plants at different physical levels. And that would be good to look at. The Xerces Society, which is quoted, there's not a quote, but a web link at the end of this presentation, is a primary resource for all things pollinator. And there's several guides, including region-specific guides. And the region for us is actually the Great Lakes region, because we're very similar to the other areas around the other Great Lakes. But look at that and look for there for native plants and growing strategies. So thinking about the changing climate, there are issues to work through. One of the primary ones that we have, which is different than most parts of the country, is we have flooding. We have flooding both on a macro level with major flood events that are occurring with hurricanes and other storms, and also on a micro level that we can have very wet summers and our gardens can, I know my garden can often look like this. Um, so we have this problem. We are also having, our growing season is changing. We are a full climate zone warmer than we were 10 years ago. So that there's good news that we can grow longer, but it's also changing the pests that are here and the issues that we were dealing with. I see this most dramatically in our forests. There is a creature called the hemlock woolly adelgid, which attacks hemlock trees, which are the primary trees of the Adirondack region of Herkimer County, but also around our areas here in southern Herkimer County and elsewhere in the Mohawk Valley. And the emerald ash borer, all are being spread more rapidly because of the warmer weather. And this is going to dramatically change our forests as we shift to tree species. There's going to be large amounts of dead outs that we haven't really seen here in a long time since the chestnut blight maybe or Dutch elm disease. But we're getting multiples at once. We got I think the chestnut blight came first, and that was the early 20th century, and Dutch elm disease came through in the mid 20th century. These are two or three different tree plagues that are happening at once. Um, there's also needle cast disease that is hitting spruce and fir trees. So we're seeing a lot. So we need to kind of deal with it as best we can in the home landscape. I've covered this a couple of times, but I'm a big soil guy. Soil is an important thing to know what you have and to manage it and improve it as best you can. So increase your organic matters always there, reduce tillage, test it so you know what it is, and promote biodiversity. So I've covered this in the past, but I just want to throw this in to make you think of it again. So even though we live in a fairly wet environment, we can have a very dry summer. And we can have challenges keeping our plants watered and keeping everything sufficiently hydrated, including ourselves, I think. Some ways around this are harvesting the rainwater. You can put a rain barrel in off of your downspout of your gutter. You can get rain barrels from the Soil and Water during their annual tree sale, which unfortunately just occurred. They might still be able to sell you one, but they have very low cost rain barrels that you can collect water and bring it into your garden. And if you're on city water, particularly metered water, that is a good cost savings. Also put in this is drip irrigation soaker hoses. This is a good way to water, and it's good for a couple of reasons. One is it directs the water to where it's needed. Now, if I had this garden, I would actually mulch over that that soaker hose, because that would keep it under the water, and it would under the mulch, and it would resist evaporation. But you can turn this on. So the other way it saves you labor. You don't have to haul buckets of water or move hose around. It's kind of set up in place and stays there. And then you just kind of turn it on and let it go. And finally, watering deeply is an important concept. When you're spraying a hose and you're spraying it like that, it never gets very deep. If you ever do that, take a minute, turn the water off and go in the ground and scrape with your finger where it's wet. You'll see that oftentimes it doesn't go beyond an inch in the ground. It'll pool and it will run off, particularly if you have clay soil. So you want to concentrate on watering deeply and watering early or late in the day so the water has a time to soak in before it gets hot. It's much more effective. It's effective both in the economy of water you're using and also in your physical effort. And then choose your plants wisely because there are plants that are better adapted. Native plants tend to be better adapted to this environment. Um, and increasingly, local nurseries and garden centers are carrying native plants. So look for something that's native. Drought tolerant varieties if you have a dry area. Heat tolerant or plan around heating, plan around your garden calendar around the hot part of the year. So plant your lettuce and peas early, harvest, and then do a succession planting with something that's more warm tolerant, like beans, the second part of the summer, so that you're avoiding the depth of the summer on plants that really can't stand that extra heat. So just some reasons for managing water, to protect from erosion and fertility loss. Some ways to do that is improve drainage. That's what I've been really working on, mostly building swales, and a swale is just a simple shallow ditch um, that is directed by gravity downwards and away from your planting area. You can use a tiller to do that, rotary plow if you have a more fancy tiller, but a regular tiller will do that. You just adjust the depth setting as you move down the road. So that mechanically kind of does it. You can rent more sophisticated pieces of equipment, but a tiller will do it and with not much extra effort. Um, you can do a French drain. A French drain is a trench with gravel and a perforated pipe. But that's a very elaborate thing to do, and I would save that for really chronic landscape water problems you may have where there's water settling in one part of your lawn for long periods of time. Um, and then, if you're planting an open garden, build raised beds. Most tillers have a function where you can hill up the soil, either by a plow-like arrangement or something else. And that way you can get the bed up high enough so it will be out of the water regardless if you have a particularly sensitive area and wet area. So, seems like a funny kind of subject for upstate New York, but sometimes we have extreme heat, and there are a couple of different ways to manage extreme heat. One is to take advantage of the patterns of light and shadow on your garden space. If you have a shadowy area that, where part of the day it's shielded from direct sun, that would be a good place to plant your greens and other sensitive crops and leave the tomatoes and peppers and other things for full sun. Mulching heavily insulates the soil and retains moisture. So mulch can be as elaborate as multiple layers of different types of organic material, from straw to shredded bark or wood chips, or it can be as low tech as saving cardboard, uncoated brown cardboard from like Chewy, if you have pet, or Amazon boxes, and putting that down and perhaps even covering it with grass clippings. Um, that will give you that protection, and it will shield the plant from the worst of the heat. Again, water early in the day. And use of row covers is an effective way of managing heat, particularly again for greens. And a row cover is a very simple structure. They come in a variety of sizes from like 18 inches to maybe even 3 feet. Simply wire hoops that go in the ground with a mesh-like fabric that goes over them. And that shields the worst of the heat. It also keeps insects. If you have squash borers or problems with other aphids, if you put it down before they get prominent, that will keep them away from your plants and protect them. So you want to encourage beneficial insects, and a way to do that is working with pollinator safe practices in your home landscape. We're talking a little bit about that right now. Use companion planting to attract beneficials and deter insects, pests, and to use the least toxic methods of pest control when an outbreak happens. Sometimes we have pests that are particularly problematic. I'm thinking about like Colorado potato beetle for potatoes, where they can easily get out of control and kill off an entire crop. So getting on those early. So with the beetle, you can see and I think I've talked about this in an earlier session, but you can see the eggs on the underside of the potato leaves. So go out and look at your garden on a daily basis. Turn your leaves upside down, and when there's little orange eggs on the bottom attached in clusters, you're going to have a potato beetle problem in just a couple weeks' time. So the way that's non-toxic to go through that is simply clip all those off and soak them in detergent or just dispose of them in a way. If you then have the beetles themselves, pick them off and put them in soapy water, like dish detergent and water. And it's kind of gross, but it's effective, zero toxicity to you or to the plants. But in the worst case, if you have a really bad outbreak and you need your potatoes, you might have to use a heavier duty insecticide. Follow the label, use it minimally, and it's better to use it lightly, following the directions over a couple of courses of treatment than it is to douse the plant in heavy doses of insecticide, which will wind up in your soil and in your food. So be very strategic about how you use those things. Um, so as our seasons shift, there are different ways of adaptation. We think that we just came out for a cold season. Just a few weeks ago, I was looking out a frozen backyard here, and now it's in the full bloom of spring practically. But in the winter, early in the winter, as early as late February, one can use a cold frame. And a cold frame is what you see in the picture there, a simple box with a old window over it, placed in a sunny location. It will pick up enough heat and you can begin to grow cold tolerant spinach and broccoli and things like that in the cold frame to give you a bump on the season. Correspondingly, at the other end of the season, it will keep things warmer into December. So you can almost go to a full 3 season garden, almost 4 season, by using these and carefully managing the crops that are growing in them. Practice succession planting. So as the plants are harvested, put something right back in the ground so you continue to use the ground, keep that fertility going. And also look at your varieties that you're planting. What are the grow times? So how long does it take? How many days until you can harvest? Um, and then plan that out in your garden planner so that you can plant uh, one variety that's going to come into it's going to be harvested early, in a mid-season and a late season, and you'll have food through the summer and into the fall. So let's talk about building a pollinator garden. So the first thing you want to do is figure out your site. This is more formal. Most people build pollinator gardens in a more wild fashion. But the first thing to do is actually just don't do anything and look at your yard and look where the sun is, and also look where the soil is wet or dry or what the conditions are in the soil. You might even want to create with a piece of grid paper a little map and map those places out. And as you think about the design that you want to have, look at those patterns because they're going to tell you where certain things will do well and where certain things won't do well. Look at your soil type, always look at your soil type and get to know it. Your drainage, avoid places that have chronic issues with standing water or address the issues with standing water. How much space do you have available and how much energy do you want to put in it? A lot of people believe that a pollinator garden, because it's heavily based on native plants, is a maintenance-free garden. And in many ways, once it's established, it's much less maintenance than a more formal garden, but it is actually more effort on the beginning side of it because it takes more planning, more work to get the plants successfully rooted and established so that they get ready to grow. So it'll really a reasonable time period for a native pollinator garden is probably a full 18 months to 2 years before it begins to look like much of anything. The first year it's going to be just very small plants, and then they will grow and they begin to establish themselves. So one way to prepare your any garden really, but this is something that we get frequent questions about. People are starting a garden. They want to know what to do about the weeds and the grass, and how do they get it down to bare soil. You can till it all up, but then you're chopping up and redistributing those seeds among several different layers of soil. Um, so what the best way to do is remove the existing grass and do that really with a pitchfork and spade. It's laborious, but it's the most effective way. And take that off and put it in a compost area, the compost down. But then the soil below is still going to have weed seeds. And a way to get rid of them that I really like is solarization. And solarization is the act of getting your ground bed ready, prepped, physically prepped, putting down clear plastic, not white plastic, not black plastic, clear plastic, and then getting it in very close contact to the soil at a time of year. Like this would be the earliest that you would establish it. You'd probably be better off like in the first week of May. Where the sun is going to beat down on that clear plastic and it forms a mini greenhouse, and it's going to cook that soil underneath. It's going to get that soil up to 150 degrees on a sunny day. That will kill your weed bed, your weed seeds, the bed of weed seeds, and also sterilize many other problems with the soil, such as nematodes and other creatures. It's very effective. It's a little bit labor intensive, but it's non-toxic and effective, and you do it once and you're ready to plant into that. So when you start to plant, you want to consider again, the dimensions of the plant. Vertical, are they tall plants, or medium-sized plants, low to the ground, and mix it up so that the pollinators have a lot of different shapes and sizes to go to, have access through the seasons, and also for both your pleasure and for the utility of it all, have pathways through it so you can get maintenance, and also you can enjoy this because it's a very enjoyable type of garden to be in. Because when you have blossoms like this degree of blossoms, you'll see any number of pollinators working the flowers on a daily basis, and they change through the course of the day. There's different insects that will attract it in the morning, as in the afternoon, as in the late afternoon. So just another slide on soils. Add organic matter, especially if it's this area, a lot of clay. Add compost, perlite, or something like that. Work it in. Um, so one thing that I highly recommend, particularly with a pollinator garden, because the plants are very specific, and you'll be working with a number of plant species that you're perhaps not used to, is to create a record. And this is a beautiful record that someone created of a pollinator garden. If you're artistic and can do that, more power to you. But a simple spreadsheet or even graph paper where you plot out the garden and you physically locate where the different plants are. So you have their names, their location, when they were planted, what their spacing requirements are and bloom times. And then just a side note is avoid aggressive species. Managing it. So once you have it established, it's not a maintenance-free thing. They need what every other plant needs. So watering, weeding are very important. Pollinator plants, even though they're native and they're adjusted to this environment, are often outcompeted by weeds that will crowd them out and make your garden hard to grow. Mulching is very helpful for that. Deadheading is something that it's onerous, it's tedious, but it will be very helpful for you to do that, because it both encourages a continuous bloom, so you're having flowers through the season. And also it removes potential material for um, insects and other problematic organisms. So deadhead, keep looking for, what I do encourage people is to spend a lot of time in the garden. So, take your evening, after work, decompression time, cup of tea or a strong drink as your pleasure dictates, and just sit in the garden and decompress and look what's going on, notice it, and if you see a problem, address it. Otherwise, just enjoy the time there. And then another note to leave some areas undisturbed so that you can have a natural seed bed going. Um, some things to help the pollinators. One is water is something that's very helpful. Honeybees will go after water in a hot season. So once upon a time, I kept bees in an urban environment in Burlington, Vermont. And people didn't even know they were there because there was a tall fence around our small backyard. And I had a garden and I had the bees tucked all the way in the back behind a compost bin. No one saw them, no one knew they were there. And so my next door neighbor, who had a swimming pool on a hot August day, said, "Where are all these bees coming from? My swimming pool is full of them." And I looked over the fence, and there must have been 200 bees drowning in his pool because they were going there for water, and it was too deep, and they end up drowning. So just like a bird bath or a shallow dish with some stones so they can walk on it and just top it off with water. And not just honeybees, but all native pollinators will like that. Birds will take it. And it's a great way of supporting the pollinators. You can create shelters for pollinators, then that can be that undisturbed area at the edge of the garden. You can also buy or build houses. This is it's a component, it's a section of a bee house for solitary bees. And these are, I'm not sure what plant material this is, but it's just a plant that has a hollow core, and just cut up a number of them and stack them, and then put them in a wooden frame, or you can buy them. And solitary bees like to go in there, like mason bees and other types, and build their nests in there, and that becomes their home. So that's another way to do it. Um, we'll talk about milkweed. But if you have a community garden where you're keeping a garden, or your friends are keeping a garden, encourage them to put pollinator safe practices in that space. So if you're going to grow native wildflowers from seed, an important thing to know is about stratifying the seeds. Stratifying in the seeds is the seeds need to be exposed to a certain amount of cold weather, of cold, before they will germinate. And there's various ways to do that. But two ways are, one is just putting them in a wet paper towel and putting them in the refrigerator for a month or more, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, and then planting them, or to actually start them in grow pots or whatever you start seeds in, and water them heavily, and then put them in a protected uh, cold place, like a shed or a barn, over the winter. That's a little bit more natural way to go. They'll be more adapted. You do have to watch out, though, that if you have seeds in unprotected grow pots and the like, that you put them someplace where cats can't get into them, the dogs can't get into them on their way to, getting someplace else. Kids can't knock them over. So put them in protected places. I've experienced all of these problems. And also label them carefully with weather resistant, Sharpies or something, so you know what it is you're growing. Because I've also had plants at the end of the season, they start to blossom, and I actually have no idea what they are. So stratifying seeds, there's more in it in the publicational site at the end about it, but that's going to be one of your concepts, is actually going to start the seeds in the fall rather than the spring. And you're going to expose them to cold so they will know they will begin to blossom at the right time. So we're going to look at some very important upstate New York plants. This is a small selection, a dozen or so, of what we think are some of the best to grow. There are others in the publications that I'll cite at the end of this. So asters. Asters are, because of, again, they extend the season. Asters are some of the latest plants to blossom and are available to pollinators. And they're available to pollinators. They're frost resistant into October. And we have a couple here. This is the New England aster. It's a smaller aster, and it is good for bumblebees, butterflies, sweat bees, honeybees. This is also something that grows in very poor soil very well. You often see it on disturbed sites like an old farm field. Um, and it's also important to caterpillars. So this is a really important one for species survival. This is its relative, the smooth aster. Another one that is really important because it's late season uh, extension for a variety of insects that need this before they overwinter. This is, as a beekeeper, one of my most important, and that's goldenrod. And we know that goldenrod's everywhere, so you probably don't need to plant it, but you can tolerate it again in edging areas or less mowed areas. This is for honeybees, the last gasp at a major nectar flow. Asters have some nectar, but not a lot. Goldenrods are very nectar heavy, and they have a very distinct, the nectar and the honeycomb has a very distinct scent. So when bees are working goldenrod and you walk through the apiary, you can kind of smell it, and it's not a bad smell, but it's a distinct one. It's really one of the most important species of plants in our area for not just honeybees, but all manner of insects, migratory pollinators, and those that are in our environment. We're very concerned about monarch butterflies, and monarch butterflies are almost wholly dependent on a few different varieties of milkweed. So milkweed seeds are available. You can plant. It's a beautiful flower, and it comes in a variety of different colors. Um, but you can also support it by not mowing it. If you have some open land, like in my yard, which is 5 acres, we only mow a certain portion of it. There are places that have established milkweed growing areas, and I tend to leave those until after the monarchs fly, and the monarchs fly south sometime third week August into early September. So when I stop seeing the monarchs, I know that I can mow it down and clear that area so that it doesn't grow up into brush. Um, but this is a really good one. The seeds are easily available from a variety of sources. The colors are, from this is very subtle compared to this butterfly milkweed, which I've only seen in a cultivated form, but the color of it kind of matches the monarch's color. So this one's a good one that is often grown in people's pollinator gardens. And finally, swamp milkweed, which actually is a later blooming than the earlier other varieties. So again, it's a season extender, so it carries you a little bit further into the fall. And it's also an interesting color where you have the pink and the white. And it also, because the name kind of gives us away, a swamp milkweed, it tolerates damper conditions than the others. The others prefer a drier soil and don't like wet. So if you have a wet area, the swamp milkweed is the way to go. Bee balm. This isn't the best picture of bee balm, but it's one that shows one that's a wasp, another pollinator, and it's pollinating really what you think after the flower's gone by. So it kind of shows you what the extent is that they're still getting nutrition off of it, even when it looks like it's gone by. But bee balm, another one's available in a variety of different colors. This is a very subtle color compared to some bee balm. And it's very attractive, not just to these wasps, but to all manner of pollinators. So this will be a good one to attract things and also build a good color sense in your garden. Echinacea, perhaps the most multi-purpose of the pollinator plants. It's a it comes back. It's an annual, but a perennial. Where's It's also a very important herbal remedy. So echinacea, purple coneflower, is really a good one for a variety of purposes. It grows strong and tall, so you would be part of that vertical element. The wild geranium, this is something you see in the forest. It tolerates a lot of shade compared to the others. The others prefer more full sun. It's a small but pretty flower, and it's also hosts specific varieties of pollinator insects. Columbine, this is a variety we don't see in the wild much here, but you can get seeds for it. Another one that comes in a variety of different color patterns, depending upon the variety. And it is attractive to both hummingbirds and bumblebees. So it's attracting different types of pollinators. Vervain, which is it's one that it blossoms for long periods of time through the summer. So it provides a good long bloom time, and it is something that is attractive to a variety of pollinators.
Garrett, you have a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Is it too late to plant milkweed?
Um, yeah, because milkweed needs to be stratified. So if you got seed, it may be too late for the season, because if you'd stratified it, cooled it in like February, it would be ready right about now. So you might be able to buy starts somewhere, but otherwise you should be planning for next year for milkweed. Oxeye sunflower. This is a beautiful one and adds a lot of color, a lot of splash, a lot of interest by, again, a wide variety of pollinators. Um, and then that kind of closes off our top 12, but there are many, many more. I just want to say that just talked about these resources. You'll get some more resources in the morning or tomorrow by email. But the first one is creating a pollinator garden for New York and the Northeast. This is based on Xerces research. Bee Basics is USDA, and then the Cornell Pollinator Network has a variety of resources for you. And Xerces is the one to go to for the most, that really they focus entirely on pollinators. And they national in scope, but they do focus on particular areas. As I said, we're in what they call the Great Lakes area. So there's very specific information for this region. So that concludes the program for tonight. Does anybody have any questions?
There is another question in the chat.
Okay.
For the solitary bee house, do I need to clean the tubular structures out to use the house again for the following year?
Yes, I would just take a thin stick or a piece of wire and pull the last year's remains out, so it's again a hollow. They like to go in and create their own home. But I wouldn't do that right away, because there may be some creatures kind of overwintering in there. So don't do it right away. In fact, yeah, you might want to look into that, because as the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking that they could possibly be used as an overwintering site, and you don't want to clean out a creature that's been spending the winter in there. Anything else? Okay, well, next week is our final on garden management, and I hope you all get a chance to get into the garden on this beautiful stretch of weather we're having. And good night.